Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Today we're diving once again into a world of magic, mystery, and mistakes. That's right. We're opening the pages of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the second book in J.K. Rowling's legendary saga. It feels familiar, the return to Hogwarts, sinister omens, a serpent lurking underground, and a boy with a wand in hand. But even the most devoted fans have found themselves puzzled while rereading this installment. Some things just don't add up. Others feel downright odd. Today, I'll walk you through the strangest moments in the second chapter of the Potterverse. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Fawkes and the Chamber of Secrets. One of the most dramatic moments in the book is Harry's battle with the Basilisk. Everything in that scene feels perfectly choreographed. Fawkes arrives just in time, blinds the serpent, drops the sorting hat with a sword inside. But let's take a step back. How on earth did Fawkes even get into the chamber? The tunnel entrance was blocked by rubble, and Ron and Lockhart stayed behind. So, did Fawkes have his own route in? That raises an even bigger question. How many entrances does the chamber actually have? And if there are others, why haven't they been discovered in centuries? Too convenient, don't you think? Number 2. Parseltongue and the Silent Snake. The dueling scene where Harry speaks to a snake is full of tension. Everyone is shocked. The chosen one is a Parselmouth. Later, when Harry hears the Basilisk whispering through the pipes, neither Ron nor Hermione hear anything at all. Sure, they can't understand snake language, but can't they at least hear the hissing sounds? Does Parseltongue magically mute itself for everyone except the speaker? Or did Harry suddenly develop some kind of supernatural hearing? Number 3. Moaning Myrtle. On what floor exactly? At first, Hermione tells the boys that Moaning Myrtle haunts the bathroom on the first floor, clear enough. But a little later, when they're brewing Polyjuice potion, they use a bathroom on the second floor, and Myrtle is there too. So, does Myrtle have multiple homes, or did the castle shift floors overnight? Or maybe Rowling's notebook had a floor plan glitch. Even for a magical school, this level of floor confusion is a bit much. Number 4. Dobby's magic and the Ministry's blindness. At the start of the book, Dobby uses a levitation spell in the Dursleys' house. The Ministry immediately blames Harry, the underage wizard using magic in a muggle home. Very strict, very by the book. But wait, Dobby didn't just levitate a cake, he sealed doors, teleported in and out, left magical traces everywhere, and the Ministry only noticed one spell? Where's the logic in their surveillance system? Number 5. Lord Voldemort's math fail. When Harry realizes Tom Riddle and Voldemort are the same person, the Dark Lord tells him, "Your mother died to save you, and in doing so she gave you 12 years of borrowed time." Poetic. But not true. Harry was 1 year old when Voldemort vanished. In Chamber of Secrets, he's 12. Which means 11 years have passed, not 12. Even Dark Lords mess up their math sometimes, it seems. Number 6. The cover owl that wasn't Hedwig. The British edition of Chamber of Secrets features a bright cover illustration, Harry, Ron and Hedwig flying to Hogwarts in the Ford Anglia. All fine, except for one glaring issue. The owl on the cover is a barn owl, but Hedwig, as every fan knows, is a snowy owl, white, fluffy and northern. How did this mistake slip by? Kidded on the book's main illustration. Was the artist rushing? Did Rowling not notice? Either way, it's a sloppy error, one that even non-bird lovers can spot. Number 7. Valentine's Day. On a Sunday? This scene didn't make it into the film, but in the book, Professor Lockhart throws a full-blown Valentine's Day celebration at Hogwarts. Singing dwarves, cheesy poems, hearts and glitter everywhere. And all this happens during a school day. But if you check the calendar, February 14th, 1993 was a Sunday, meaning no classes should have been held that day and no dwarves interrupting lessons. Apparently, Lockhart didn't just override school rules, he bent time itself. Number 8. Why didn't anyone hear the basilisk in the pipes? Harry hears it clearly. a long, low hiss echoing through the walls. Kill, rip, tear. The voice makes his skin crawl. He clutches his head in the hallway while Ron stares at him in confusion. You heard that? Ron asks. That voice. But no one else hears it. Not Hermione, not the professors, not even Dumbledore. Only Harry hears the basilisk whisper through the pipes, whispers that slither like knives down stone corridors. But what about the rest of it? The basilisk is massive, a creature the length of a bus covered in scales, scraping through metal pipes and ancient plumbing. That kind of movement should shake the walls, pipes should rattle, floors should hum. Someone should have heard something. Even Filch, who notices dust out of place, doesn't react. Has Hogwarts grown so used to odd noises that thunderous crawling through the ceiling just blends in? Or maybe the real magic of the Chamber of Secrets wasn't the monster, but the castle's uncanny ability to pretend nothing's wrong. Number 9. Who repaired the exploded bathroom? For weeks, Harry, Ron and Hermione used Moaning Myrtle's bathroom as their private potion lab. They brewed the complex and dangerous Polyjuice potion in secret. Cauldrons bubbled, tiles cracked, steam filled the room. At one point, Hermione melted a section of the sink, and when the potion went wrong, when she accidentally turned into a cat, she left in a panic. The bathroom, wrecked and reeking of burnt lacewing flies, was abandoned. But no one ever mentioned repairs, not a teacher, not Filch, not even Myrtle, who loved to complain. So who cleaned it, who fixed the pipes, scrubbed the soot, and replaced the shattered porcelain? The book never says. Filch, known for obsessively chasing messes, somehow missed weeks of illicit potion-making in a girl's bathroom. Maybe magic handled it all off-page. Maybe a quiet reparo from an anonymous professor did the job. Or maybe, like so many strange things at Hogwarts, it just fixed itself. But that silence, no questions, no punishments, raises one more mystery. In a castle full of eyes, how did no one notice the explosion in the bathroom? Number 10. Why didn't they clean the bloody message? The message was written in red, dripping letters across the stone wall. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. It was terrifying. Students screamed. Teachers gasped. Filch wept over his petrified cat. And yet days later, the writing was still there. No one cleaned it. No one erased it. It remained like a monument to fear, a symbol of power left for every terrified student to walk past on their way to class. Was it written in blood? Hagrid seems to think so. That's blood, that is, he growls. But even if it wasn't, even if it was just red paint or magical ink, Hogwarts has spells for this. A simple Scourgify could clean the worst messes. McGonagall once tidied a chalk-covered blackboard with a flick of her wand. So, why not this? Why would Dumbledore, wise, careful Dumbledore, allow a threatening message to hang like a curse over his students? Was it a warning, a psychological tactic? Or did even he feel powerless? It's never explained. The message becomes part of the scenery, like the moving staircases or talking portraits. It's just there. But what kind of school lets children pass a magical death threat every morning without comment? The longer it stayed up, the more it worked. Fear grew, rumours spread, whispers filled the halls, and that red writing on the wall, whether blood or ink, became a silent voice that screamed louder than any spell. Number 11. What happened to Hagrid's roosters? One line, that's all J.K. Rowling gives us. All the roosters had been killed. Hagrid says it almost in passing, as if someone had misplaced a broomstick. But those roosters were not just any animals. According to the book, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the crow of a rooster is fatal to a basilisk. That sound alone could have ended the horror in Hogwarts before it ever began. And yet, every single rooster in the school grounds is found dead, their throats slit. But who killed them? That's never explained. We're led to believe it was Ginny Weasley under the influence of Tom Riddle's diary. It makes sense. She's the one opening the chamber. She's the one writing on the walls. But murdering animals, slipping out of the castle to the pumpkin patch, slitting throats with what, a knife? Ginny is 11. Even possessed, would she know how to silence magical protection like that? There's no mention of her remembering the act. No scene showing regret, just silence. And it couldn't have been the basilisk. A snake, even a magical one, doesn't have hands. It can bite, crush, stare, but can carefully cut the necks of birds while avoiding detection. And yet no teacher raises an alarm. No magical investigation is launched. No protective charms are placed around the remaining animals. The loss of the roosters is treated like a minor accident when it's actually the closest Hogwarts ever got to a weapon against the monster. Imagine if just one rooster had survived. Hagrid could have walked down to the chamber entrance and let it crow. The basilisk would have dropped dead instantly. Ginny would have been saved without a duel. No sword, no phoenix, no deadly stare. Just one bird, one sound, but someone made sure that would never happen. And we never learn who. Number 12. Why didn't Hermione warn anyone? When Hermione is found petrified near the library, her hand is clenched around a torn page. It's a page ripped from a book. Not one of Gilderoy Lockhart's, but from an old library text. Across the top, in her handwriting, it says, "Of the basilisk." She had figured it out. The monster was a giant serpent. She had even written, "Spiders flee before it. The cry of the rooster can kill it." Everything. They needed to know. Everything that could have stopped more attacks, but no one knew until it was too late. Hermione had connected the dots. She knew the creature was moving through the plumbing. She guessed it killed with its eyes. She even suspected the connection to Parseltongue. That's why she was found near a mirror. She had tried to see the monster's reflection, not its direct gaze. It worked. She survived, petrified, but alive. But why didn't she tell anyone? She could have warned Harry. She could have gone to Professor McGonagall. One word might have saved the next victim, but she chose silence. Hermione was never reckless. She was always the one who stopped Harry and Ron from rushing into danger. In Philosopher's Stone, she says, we could be killed, or worse, expelled. She reads, she plans, she thinks. But this time, something changed. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she doubted herself. Maybe she thought the teachers wouldn't believe her. Or maybe she just didn't have time. Maybe the moment she made the connection, the basilisk was already near. Still it leaves a question. Why didn't she pass a note? Tell Madam Pince? Warn someone? Anyone? She had the answer in her hands, and instead of using it to stop the attacks, she went looking for proof. Proof that cost her her voice, her movement, and nearly her life. Hermione Granger solved the mystery, but in the end, she solved it alone, and that silence nearly cost Hogwarts everything. Number 13. Why didn't Harry show the diary sooner? When Harry finds the old diary in Moaning Myrtle's flooded bathroom, it's blank. No name, no writing, just the initials T.M. Riddle stamped inside. Ron immediately says that's not just a diary, that's dangerous. But Harry doesn't listen, he keeps it, he hides it. And when the diary begins to write back to him in ink that vanishes seconds later, he still tells no one. Not Hermione, not McGonagall, not even Dumbledore. It becomes a secret friendship, written in silence. The diary pulls him in. Tom Riddle shows Harry memories, twisting truth into suspicion. I can show you, Riddle writes, and soon Harry is watching a memory where Hagrid appears guilty. Harry, rattled and confused, begins to doubt his only friend, and still he keeps it to himself. The danger is obvious, a diary that talks, a diary that thinks, a diary that lies. But Harry never questions where it came from or who put it there. He never asks the most important thing, why me? It's not that Harry is reckless, though he is. It's that he's alone. Adults in the wizarding world have failed him before. The Dursleys ignored him. The Ministry blamed him. Even Dumbledore rarely answers him directly, so when something strange happens, Harry's first instinct is to handle it alone, but this time his silence nearly kills someone. While he keeps his secret, Ginny is falling deeper under the diary's control. By the time Harry realizes it, the damage is done. She won't wake up, he whispers in the chamber. Had he handed the diary to Hermione, brilliant, cautious Hermione, she might have seen what it was. She would have researched Horcruxes. She would have warned the teachers. If he had gone to Dumbledore, the headmaster might have recognized the handwriting. Instead, the diary stayed hidden. And Ginny nearly died. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a turning point. The first time Harry chose secrecy over trust and learned what it could cost. Number 14. How did Hagrid know about the spiders? When Hagrid is taken to Azkaban, he turns to Harry and gives a cryptic piece of advice. If anyone wanted to find out some stuff, all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders. He says this just before being dragged away, a moment heavy with mystery. But here's the strange part. How does Hagrid even know that spiders are fleeing from something in the castle? More importantly, how does he know what they're fleeing from? The answer isn't so obvious, and that's where the confusion begins. Years ago, Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts after being accused of opening the Chamber of Secrets. Back then, the creature was believed to be Aragog, the acromantula he secretly raised. Hagrid always insisted Aragog never hurt anyone, and Aragog, in his own words, later confirms this. The girl was found in a bathroom. I never saw any part of Hogwarts but the cupboard I grew up in. So if Hagrid truly believed his pet was innocent and had no idea what the real monster was, how could he suddenly suggest that following the spiders would lead Harry to the truth? Spiders? Don't fear Aragog. They serve him. But they do fear the Basilisk. Aragog himself says, "We do not speak of it. We do not name it. The thing that lives in the castle is our natural enemy." So when the spiders begin fleeing the school, it means something worse than Aragog is at large. Yet that logic only works if Hagrid knows it's not Aragog this time. And to reach that conclusion, he'd need to know what creature was responsible. But no one, not even Dumbledore, had identified the monster at that point. That makes Hagrid's warning to Harry unsettlingly specific. He doesn't say be careful or look into the past. He gives a trail to follow, a trail only meaningful if someone knows what it leads to. Did Hagrid piece it together based on the fear in Aragog's behavior? Was it something he read or heard during his years as gamekeeper? Or did he always suspect that the chamber was never truly closed the first time? For a man who was expelled in third year, Hagrid seems to know far more than anyone expects, and no one ever asks how. Number 15. Professor Binns denies the obvious. Professor Cuthbert Binns, the only ghost teacher at Hogwarts, is an oddity even among the many eccentric figures that roam the castle's enchanted halls. He died one day and simply got up to teach the next, forgetting entirely that he had passed on. But it isn't just his spectral nature or monotonous lecturing that makes him a curious figure. It's his stubborn ignorance of one of the most significant events in Hogwarts' recent past. When asked about the Chamber of Secrets in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Binns flatly dismisses the entire legend as fantasy, a fabrication designed to excite impressionable minds. Yet the facts that contradict him are not only compelling but publicly known. How can a history professor, alive or dead, deny what the school has already lived through? The moment in question occurs during a history of magic lesson shortly after the first attack on Mrs. Norris Filch's cat. The school is buzzing with rumours. Whispers of the chamber have surfaced once again, and the students, curious and frightened, ask Professor Binns about its origins. Binns reacts with disdain, declaring, "My subject is history of magic. I deal with facts, not myths and legends." This could be excused as academic snobbery, a ghost clinging to dry scholarship and scorning folklore. But the story of the Chamber of Secrets is not just a fable. It has left a real trail of damage and suffering, attacks, a death, expulsions. For Binns to deny it entirely is more than negligence, it borders on absurdity. Consider the tragic story of Myrtle Warren, better known as Moaning Myrtle. A student in the 1940s, she was killed inside the very walls of Hogwarts. Her death wasn't a quiet tragedy buried in dusty archives, it was a headline event. The ministry got involved, the school was on the verge of shutting down, students were pulled from their dormitories. Tom Riddle, the brilliant and manipulative orphan who would become Lord Voldemort, stood in the headmaster's office and pleaded that the school be saved. He named a culprit, Rubeus Hagrid. The result? Hagrid was expelled, his wand snapped, his future in magic obliterated. All this happened during Binns' time, and yet he claims to know nothing? Ghosts at Hogwarts are peculiar, yes, but they are still sentient beings. They observe, they interact, they gossip at the very least. The fat friar knows student names. The bloody baron haunts the dungeons with bitter awareness. Even Peeves, though not a ghost, is full of castle secrets. Professor Binns, despite his spectral state, continues to teach, continues to lecture, continues to exist within the intellectual life of the school. For him to be oblivious to such a massive, documented crisis in the school's history defies logic. It wasn't even that long ago. Myrtle's ghost still weeps in a bathroom. The crime scene has a living witness. Moreover, the case wasn't hidden. Dumbledore, then Transfiguration Professor, was involved in the aftermath. Headmaster Armando Dippet consulted with the ministry. Hagrid's expulsion was entered into school records. The plumbing system was physically altered because of the event. Myrtle's bathroom was shut down for years. Surely a ghost who lectures about goblin rebellions from centuries ago should be aware of a catastrophe that happened just decades prior. Yet Binns shrugs it off, saying, "There is no chamber of secrets." It's not that he doubts its purpose or origin, he denies its very existence. This isn't just a factual error, it's a betrayal of his role. A history teacher who refuses to acknowledge history is worse than a poor educator. He becomes a propagator of falsehood. Hogwarts, steeped in centuries of magical tradition, has always relied on its professors to be the guardians of its lore. When the Chamber of Secrets reopens in Harry's second year, it triggers panic not only among students, but among staff. McGonagall fears for their safety. Dumbledore is forced to step aside, and yet the one person who is literally a historian scoffs at the entire premise. What does this say about his reliability? Perhaps it's his nature. Professor Binns is a ghost not just in form, but in soul. He has lost the human quality of curiosity. He lives in a loop of lectures, disconnected from the shifting world around him. He clings to certainty and comfort. Legends are messy. They involve feelings, rumours, passions. Binns wants dates, treaties, verified duels. But even within his narrow definition of history, the chamber should qualify. There are documented expulsions, student deaths, ministry inquiries. The legend has bled into fact, and still he refuses to open his eyes. The contrast is striking when compared to other professors. Professor McGonagall, logical and strict as she is, doesn't deny the possibility of the chamber. When asked, she doesn't ridicule the notion. She explains that the founders had differing views. Even Snape, who never hesitates to mock or minimize student concerns, takes the attack seriously. When Dumbledore assembles the staff to discuss the situation, no one, including the ghostly staff, suggests it's a hoax. Only Binns treats it like a fairy tale told by first years. And his dismissal has consequences. When a figure of authority downplays a threat, students grow confused, complacent, even reckless. Ron and Harry, frustrated by the lack of answers, resort to Polyjuice potion and illegal exploration to uncover the truth. If Binns had offered even a sliver of credible history, the students might have had a clearer path. Instead, they are forced to dig through unreliable accounts and confront ancient monsters on their own. This isn't just poor teaching, it's dangerous ignorance. In fact, his lecture even sows doubt where there should be clarity. When Hermione Granger, the most intellectually rigorous student at Hogwarts, hears Binns's dismissal, she hesitates for a time. If the school's historian says the chamber never existed, maybe it is just a student myth. And yet she still does what Binns fails to do, research. Hermione finds the legend in Hogwarts a history. She makes the leap to the possibility of basilisk attacks, and she is ultimately petrified for her efforts. In this way, the students become the true historians, while Binns stagnates in the shadows of denial. Number 16. Why didn't Ginny say anything? Ginny Weasley had always been the quietest of the Weasley siblings, but in her first year at Hogwarts, her silence took on a new, disturbing shape. From the early pages of Chamber of Secrets, the youngest Weasley seems to exist in the background, wide-eyed and anxious, flinching at shadows. She blushes furiously when Harry looks at her, which at first appears to be the sweet embarrassment of a schoolgirl's crush. But as the school year progresses, her behavior shifts into something darker, an unspoken fear growing behind every glance. Ginny stops eating. She grows pale. She trembles when people speak of the attacks, and yet, despite having 6 older brothers, 2 attentive parents, and teachers who care deeply for their students, she says nothing. Not to Percy, the pompous but protective prefect, not to Fred or George, who would have likely marched into Dumbledore's office if they suspected danger, not even to Ron, her closest sibling in age, or to her mother Molly, who had always fussed over her like a hen with a single chick. Ginny's descent into terror is not portrayed in one dramatic moment, but rather in small accumulating details. After the first attack on Mrs. Norris, she cries in the common room. She is seen staring at her hands in horror. She is excused from classes. Percy, concerned but clueless, chalks it up to nerves. Ron is too distracted by his own troubles, broken wands, flying cars and spiders, to notice. But Dumbledore is there, McGonagall is there, even Hagrid, always ready to lend a comforting ear, might have sensed something if she had approached him. She had so many chances to say something, and yet she remained silent. Why? The obvious answer is the diary. Tom Riddle's enchanted journal wasn't merely a magical object, it was a sentient, manipulative entity. It didn't just listen to Ginny's thoughts, it fed on them, twisted them, and used them to control her. But even so, Ginny showed signs of awareness. She knew something was wrong. In Chapter 13, she throws the diary away into a toilet, hoping to be free of its influence. This act alone suggests she wasn't fully possessed. She had enough clarity to make a choice. That moment is critical. It proves she knew the diary was dangerous. She knew it was hurting her. She knew it was connected to the terrible things happening at school. And yet she told no one. She could have told Hermione, the cleverest witch in their year, someone who had always treated Ginny kindly. Hermione had already suspected the diary was more than it seemed. If Ginny had told her even a sliver of the truth about the voices, the blackouts, the blood, Hermione might have solved the mystery sooner. But Ginny was silent. She could have told her mother. Molly Weasley, fiercely protective and emotionally attuned, would have taken Ginny out of Hogwarts immediately. She would have stormed into the ministry if needed. But Ginny kept the secret. The question is not just why she didn't speak, it's why she couldn't. The influence of Tom Riddle's diary was subtle and corrosive. It didn't shackle her limbs or chain her voice. It worked more cruelly than that. It used her fear, her shame, and her loneliness. It whispered into her mind that no one would believe her, that her parents would be ashamed, that Harry would hate her. It filled her with dread that the horror unfolding at Hogwarts was her fault. Riddle wasn't just stealing her thoughts, he was rewriting them. As Ginny herself later reveals, I couldn't remember what I'd been doing. I'd wake up and find myself somewhere with no idea how I'd got there. I think he made me forget things. The diary isolated her, and isolation breeds silence. And yet, Ginny had reasons to trust the people around her. She was not a child raised in coldness or neglect. She grew up in the Burrow, a place full of love and noise and laughter. She had watched her father battle corrupt ministry officials to stand up for what was right. She had seen her mother take on the world to protect her children. She knew somewhere inside that help existed, so why didn't she cry out when she had the chance? One could argue that the shame was part of the magic, that the diary didn't just possess her, it humiliated her. It made her write secrets. It made her pour out her heart, then turned those words into poison. How does a child admit they become the weapon of a ghost? Perhaps the most haunting detail is that Ginny almost tells. Before Hermione and Penelope Clearwater are petrified, Ginny tries to speak with Harry and Ron. She's described as looking pale and tense, desperate to confess something. But Percy interrupts, scolding her and brushing her off. It's a brief moment, almost throwaway, but in retrospect it feels like a scream that was smothered. She was close to admitting the truth. She was on the verge, and then the door slammed shut again. Ginny's silence can also be seen as a reflection of how children, especially young girls, process trauma. She was 11, she was new to Hogwarts, she was in awe of the older students, and suddenly she was under the influence of a force that made her feel like a monster. Children in distress often hide their pain, not because they are unaware, but because they feel they are to blame. Ginny wasn't just frightened, she was ashamed of being weak, ashamed of being manipulated, ashamed of what her hands had done while she slept. That shame, wrapped in magic and fear, was stronger than her instinct to seek help. Number 17, Polyjuice Potion and the cat hair incident. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, one of the most unsettling moments lies not in the horror of the petrifications or the whispering of Parseltongue, but rather in the quiet misstep of one of the most brilliant witches of her age, Hermione Granger. Renowned for her perfectionism, meticulous planning, and near-flawless execution of spells and potions, Hermione makes a decision that raises a baffling question. Why, in all her brilliance, does she choose to take a hair from a robe? Not from the person herself, not from a direct source, but from a piece of clothing where any trace could be anything. That one lapse leads to a transformation so grotesquely flawed that it endangers her health and removes her from the action at a pivotal moment. This is not merely an error in judgment, it reveals a deeper inconsistency in how Polyjuice Potion behaves and raises awkward questions about the logic of magic itself. The scene in question revolves around the infamous Polyjuice Potion, complex, dangerous, and requiring a month's time to brew. Hermione undertakes the task with her usual determination. She secures the ingredients, brews the potion in the abandoned girls' bathroom with the help of Harry and Ron, and prepares for their infiltration of Slytherin House. The goal is clear: discover whether Draco Malfoy is the heir of Slytherin. But when the moment comes to transform, something goes horribly wrong. While Harry and Ron successfully assume the appearances of Crabbe and Goyle, Hermione experiences something far worse. Her skin sprouts fur, her face contorts. She screams and is rushed away, later discovered to have transformed partially into a cat. The reason? The hair she believed to be from Millicent Bulstrode wasn't human at all, it belonged to a cat. As Rowling writes, her face was covered in black fur, her eyes had turned yellow, and there were long pointed ears poking through her hair. This detail isn't just comedic relief or a cautionary note, it destabilizes the internal logic of how the Polyjuice Potion should function. According to its very nature, Polyjuice Potion is meant to transform a person into another human. It is not animagus magic, it is not transfiguration. It should not be able to interpret or process non-human DNA. And yet it does. Hermione's transformation doesn't fail outright, as might be expected if the potion detected an ineligible ingredient. It doesn't explode, it doesn't reverse, it doesn't simply nullify. It works, partially. It begins the process of transformation, indicating that the potion recognizes the genetic code of a cat as a valid input, albeit one that produces catastrophic consequences. This is not merely a potion error. It suggests that Polyjuice is capable of forming a hybrid form based on whatever organic material it is given, even if that source is fundamentally non-human. This raises a disturbing thought. If Hermione had used the hair of a werewolf, would she have become a hybrid human wolf? What if someone used feathers from a hippogriff stuck on a robe? Would the result be even more monstrous? The text never suggests that the potion has a fail-safe for verifying human identity. It merely reacts to biological samples, no matter how contaminated or misleading they might be. This stands in contrast to Snape's later comments in Half-Blood Prince about the specificity and sensitivity of potion ingredients. If a bezoar can save you from most poisons but not all, then surely a human-only potion should reject cat hair immediately, but Polyjuice does not. Then comes the next awkward truth. Why did Hermione take the hair from Millicent's robe in the first place? Hermione Granger, who in Prisoner of Azkaban is confident enough to use a time-turner to attend multiple classes simultaneously, who knows the incantation for nearly every known charm by third year, who solves Snape's potion logic in Philosopher's Stone, decides to trust a random hair from a robe, not a direct extraction, not a discreet charm, not even a careful, stealthy pluck. Instead, as Hermione later tells them, she had taken the hair from Millicent's robes after their fight at the dueling club. A fight, meaning she was in close physical contact, close enough to grab a sleeve, swing an arm, shove a shoulder, close enough, in fact, to pull a real hair had she wanted. This decision feels unnatural for Hermione. In almost every other scene, she is the one who plans ahead, considers risks and avoids shortcuts. She warns Harry and Ron repeatedly about rules and consequences, yet in the moment that truly matters, she commits a reckless oversight. It seems inserted purely to remove her from the plot at a convenient moment. Her transformation into a cat disqualifies her from going into the Slytherin common room and conveniently removes her from the investigation for the next few chapters. This gives Harry and Ron more independent narrative space, but at the cost of character consistency. Furthermore, Hermione knows about magical ways to obtain hair. She could have used Accio to summon one strand, or a simple hair-plucking charm, even a charm to identify biological origin. The wizarding world has spells for everything, from detecting enchantments to identifying poisons, tracking objects, revealing lies, and yet no spell is used here to confirm that the hair belongs to Millicent, or even to a human. It's as if the entire sequence has been engineered not by Hermione but by an external force, the author's hand, forcing the mistake to happen for plot reasons. There is also the question of how the potion knew what to do with a cat hair. Did it scan the hair's DNA? Did it read the magical essence? Why didn't it simply fail? Or alternatively, if Polyjuice potion can interpret animal traits, why isn't it used in more sinister or creative ways? Why can't a dark wizard use Polyjuice to gain animal strength or vision? The incident with Hermione shows that at least partial transformation is possible, if not fatal. This opens a dark realm of magical bioengineering that the books never explore. Number 18. No one investigated the diary's origin? When Harry stood before Dumbledore in the Grand Office, holding the ink-drained diary of Tom Riddle, it felt like the end of a long and perilous chapter. Fawkes the Phoenix sang softly in the background, and the glimmering instruments on the shelves hummed as if acknowledging the victory over an ancient evil. Dumbledore accepted the diary with solemn understanding, murmuring that very few people know that Lord Voldemort was once called Tom Riddle. But in that moment of solemn closure, one question seemed to vanish into the silence. Where did the diary come from in the first place? It had possessed a girl, opened the Chamber of Secrets and nearly killed students. Yet no one, not Dumbledore, not the Ministry, not even Arthur Weasley from the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, demanded to know how such a dangerous artifact landed in the hands of an 11-year-old child. The diary had been the weapon, and it had nearly succeeded in bringing Voldemort back into the physical world. Still, after all was said and done, the adults seemed content to file it away as just another dark object without questioning its origin. Ginny Weasley, the unwilling victim of the diary's manipulation, had been writing in it for months. She confessed to feeling like someone was watching me all the time, a creeping paranoia that worsened as the diary fed off her emotions. The connection between her and the object had been deeply personal and terrifying. Yet after the events in the chamber, she was comforted, hugged, and dismissed from any deeper inquiry. No one probed her about how the diary came into her possession, perhaps out of mercy, perhaps out of negligence. But Ginny knew exactly where she'd gotten the diary. She picked it up from the stack of old schoolbooks that her father had bought for her in Diagon Alley. They had gone to Flourish and Blots, but the books themselves had been purchased second-hand from a shop called Borgin and Burke's. And though it was Arthur Weasley who insisted on avoiding such places, it was Lucius Malfoy who had orchestrated everything. He had slipped the diary into Ginny's cauldron of books, using the chaos of the bookstore fight with Arthur as the perfect distraction. He knew exactly what he was doing, planting a cursed object into the hands of the daughter of his political rival. This detail, though clear to readers and to Harry himself, never surfaced in any official way. When Dobby the house elf hinted to Harry, "Lucius Malfoy must have given it to her," the implications were enormous. Dobby had served the Malfoys for years and knew their darkest secrets, but no one asked Dobby to testify. No one from the school or the ministry followed up on that lead. No one interviewed Ginny with care, asking if she remembered who had handled her books. The thread that connected Lucius Malfoy to Voldemort through this diary was just left dangling in the air. Even when Harry confronted Lucius at the end of the book and tricked him into freeing Dobby, the conversation danced dangerously close to full exposure. Harry said plainly, "I think you slipped the diary into Ginny Weasley's cauldron in the bookshop," but Lucius dismissed it with cold amusement. That moment could have, and should have, triggered an investigation, but it didn't. It was treated like a personal spat between a boy and a powerful wizard. Lucius walked away with nothing more than a sneer and the loss of his servant. This silence is baffling, because the diary was not merely enchanted, it was a Horcrux. Of course, no one at Hogwarts knew this yet, not even Dumbledore, but the nature of its magic was unmistakably dark. The diary possessed Ginny, siphoned her life force, and used her to carry out acts of violence. A magical object of this nature doesn't appear by accident. Someone had to put it into her hands, and someone had to want the Chamber of Secrets opened again. Why wasn't that the very next question on everyone's lips? Lucius Malfoy had both motive and opportunity. He wanted to discredit Arthur Weasley, humiliate Dumbledore, and strike fear into the heart of Muggle-borns. He wanted the school to fall into chaos, perhaps even closed, so that Voldemort's ideology could fester again in the shadows. The diary was his weapon of choice, not for his own hand, but for a child's. And it worked. Students were petrified, the school trembled, and fear reigned once more. That should have been enough to warrant a full inquiry. But the wizarding world has a peculiar habit of looking away when the truth becomes inconvenient. Consider the political climate. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, was already deeply concerned about public image. He dismissed Hagrid without evidence and arrested him purely to show that he was doing something. When the threat subsided and Harry and Ron emerged from the chamber, with Ginny alive, Fudge was relieved. No one wanted to upset the status quo by suggesting that a respected member of the Hogwarts Board of Governors, Lucius Malfoy, had been involved in a near-murderous plot. Fudge needed calm, not justice. Dumbledore himself, though wise and intuitive, also remained silent. Perhaps he suspected the truth. Perhaps he saw the diary and immediately recognized the type of dark magic it held. He may have guessed at Voldemort's involvement, and he certainly noticed Malfoy's sudden interest in school politics, but he said nothing to the Ministry, took no action beyond the walls of the school, and gave no warning to the Weasley family about what had almost happened to their daughter. This silence feels less like restraint and more like complicity. The irony is painful. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, years later, Dumbledore would go to great lengths to identify and locate Horcruxes. He would scour memories, chase rumours, and even poison himself in search of these dark remnants of Voldemort's soul. But the first Horcrux had already passed through his hands, drained of ink, yes, but not of its terrible history. And he let it go, filed away, forgotten. Harry himself was too young to press for answers. He felt a surge of righteous anger when he saw Lucius Malfoy sneering, but he didn't yet understand the mechanisms of power. He believed that exposing Lucius would bring justice. But the wizarding world didn't work like that. Reputation outweighed truth. Influence silenced evidence. A boy's words were easy to ignore, even if that boy had just saved the school. The tragedy of this moment is not only the danger Ginny endured, but the opportunity that was lost. If someone had dared to trace the diary back to Lucius Malfoy, they might have discovered that Voldemort had not truly vanished. They might have realized that the Dark Lord had found a way to survive through objects. They might have begun to piece together the puzzle long before the return of Voldemort in the graveyard. The failure to investigate also reveals a deeper flaw in the magical community, a fear of confronting its own darkness. To ask where the diary came from would have meant acknowledging that a child had been used as a pawn in a war no one wanted to believe still existed. It would have meant accusing one of their own, a pure-blood aristocrat with ties to power, of treachery. It would have required courage that went beyond spellwork and bravery in battle. It would have required moral clarity. By the time the truth about Horcruxes came to light, the damage had been done. The diary, the ring, the locket, they all told the same story. Voldemort had never truly left, and the clues had been there from the beginning, written in ink, then blood, then silence. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened, but the doors to justice remained firmly shut. Years later we can look back and see that the diary was more than a cursed object. It was a test, not just for Ginny or Harry, but for the entire wizarding world. And they failed, not because they didn't know better, but because they didn't want to know. The truth was too dangerous. And so it was buried, along with the questions no one dared to ask. Number 19, how did everyone avoid direct eye contact with the Basilisk? In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the Basilisk is introduced as a creature so dangerous that a single direct glance into its eyes causes instant death. Salazar Slytherin's legendary monster was meant to be the ultimate weapon of purity, slaying Muggle-borns in the name of blood supremacy, and yet not a single person dies throughout the events of the story. This fact alone raises eyebrows. The only casualties the Basilisk leaves in its wake are petrified victims frozen in a state between life and death. Somehow, every single encounter with this supposed lethal beast ends in a technicality that spares the victim's life. The first time one reads the book, it's easy to accept this at face value, chalking it up to good fortune. But reading it again with a critical eye, it becomes clear that J.K. Rowling might have pushed the boundaries of plot convenience to an uncomfortable extreme. Colin Creevey is the first student to be petrified. When found, he is lying stiff, his camera fused shut by the Basilisk's magical power. The book explains that Colin had lifted the camera to his face, catching the serpent's gaze through the lens. According to Magical Beasts and Where to Find Them, the Basilisk's fatal stare requires direct eye contact. Rowling seems to use this technicality to justify Colin's survival, but how plausible is this scenario truly? Cameras, particularly the analog ones Colin uses, do not function like mirrors. Looking through a lens doesn't block visual rays, it simply focuses them. One must wonder. Does glass really save a life? Or was this a contrived method to avoid writing a child's death into a book meant for younger readers? Then there is Justin Finch Fletchley, who turns a corner in the corridor and finds himself face to face with the creature. But Justin, the story tells us, sees the basilisk not directly, but through the translucent ghost of nearly headless Nick, who suffers the brunt of the attack. Justin is merely collateral. His survival rests entirely on this ghostly interference. But ghosts are not solid. They're spiritual impressions. Can they actually block the eyes of a monstrous beast? It's a stretch. The ghost's own petrification is another convenient invention. How can a ghost who is already dead and incorporeal be frozen solid? The explanation, while imaginative, lacks internal consistency. Rowling needed a way for Justin to see the basilisk without dying and added Nick to the scene, but in doing so she opened the door to even more confusing magical logic. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, manages to avoid death by sheer wit. Before her petrification, she is seen with a small mirror which she uses to examine corners cautiously, suspecting the creature moves through the plumbing. Hermione's intellect saves her, yet again, but the logistics remain questionable. The mirror must have been angled perfectly. She must have been looking into it at the precise second the basilisk passed. This level of timing and preparation borders on the impossible. The situation places Hermione on the verge of a tragic fate, only to snatch her away at the last moment through a miraculous alignment of events. It is, in many ways, a narrative sleight of hand. Perhaps the strangest case is Mrs. Norris, Argus Filch's cat. She is found stiff and lifeless, hanging by her tail from a torch bracket. The explanation? She saw the basilisk's eyes through a puddle of water on the stone floor. Water, it seems, distorts the gaze just enough to change death into paralysis. But what are the odds? Water is not a polished mirror. It ripples, shifts, and changes form. For the reflection to save her, the water must have been perfectly still, the angle precise, and the cat's gaze just right. This is no longer mere coincidence. It borders on magical choreography. How likely is it that a creature bred for killing could fail so consistently? It seems less the fault of the basilisk and more a decision made by an author determined to maintain high stakes without sacrificing characters. This pattern continues throughout the book. Each victim escapes the full consequence of the creature's stare due to some fluke: glass, water, ghosts, or indirect glances. Not once does the basilisk succeed in its intended role. Even when attacking Harry in the chamber itself, the serpent fails. Armed only with a sword and the help of Fawkes the Phoenix, Harry faces down the monster and lives. He even looks into the creature's eyes safely, because they have been clawed out by Fawkes moments before. It is yet another moment of impeccable timing that prevents true danger from turning deadly. One might admire the drama of the scene, but the orchestration begins to feel suspicious. Everything always goes just wrong enough for the basilisk to fail, and just right enough for Harry and his friends to survive. This phenomenon invites a larger question. Is the basilisk, as described, a credible threat at all? Tom Riddle claims that the basilisk has killed before, referencing the death of Moaning Myrtle decades earlier. Myrtle had seen the serpent's eyes in a bathroom and died instantly. That death is the only confirmed fatality caused by the creature in the school's entire history. Even then, the attack took place in an enclosed space, giving no room for mirrors or ghosts to intervene. If this death was possible, why are none repeated? Has the basilisk somehow become less deadly over time? Or is this simply a matter of narrative protection, shielding main characters from consequences that the story itself promised? One might argue that these close calls serve the purpose of maintaining suspense. But when every encounter is foiled by a bizarre stroke of luck, the tension starts to dissolve. Readers become immune to fear because they learn the rules are bendable. The basilisk will never truly harm anyone important. The game is rigged. Rowling seems caught between the desire to create a terrifying creature and the constraints of a children's book. The result is a monster with the bark of a killer and the bite of a plot device. In terms of storytelling, these narrative decisions offer a lesson in managing stakes. A powerful threat must deliver on its promise at least once to remain credible. The death of Moaning Myrtle happens off-page in a flashback and offers no visceral connection to the monster's threat. Every on-page attack feels like a dance with padded swords. The magic rules bend too often and the coincidences mount too high. Readers are asked to accept too much too often. A puddle of water, a camera lens, a ghost's body. One might suggest that the basilisk is somehow impaired. Perhaps it cannot see as well as legend claims. Could it be nearsighted? There is no textual support for such an idea, but it would explain the streak of failed executions. Or perhaps Tom Riddle, possessing only a teenage form through his diary, cannot control the creature as precisely as he imagines. But this theory falls apart when we remember that Riddle was able to command the basilisk directly during the climax, using Parseltongue without issue. If anything, the creature's loyalty and obedience are emphasized, not questioned. The idea that Rowling intentionally handicapped the basilisk in order to escalate tension without risk becomes more convincing with each near miss. It feels as though she wanted readers to fear death without truly delivering it. The story walks a fine line between horror and safety, never fully committing to either. This dilutes the emotional impact. Fear without consequence becomes theatre. The more times a character narrowly escapes death, the less terrifying death becomes. And so we are left with a monster that never kills despite being designed to do only that. A beast whose eyes are said to kill instantly, yet somehow never meet anyone's gaze. A creature of legend and terror, undone by puddles and shadows. It is a strange contradiction, a deadly force rendered harmless by narrative convenience. The Chamber of Secrets promises ancient horror, but delivers only frozen bodies and frozen stakes. The basilisk might have been one of Rowling's most ambitious magical creations, an echo of ancient myths brought to life, but it is trapped by the boundaries of a young adult fantasy. Real horror, real loss are off limits. So instead of blood and death, we get caution and reversals. The result is a story full of tension, but strangely lacking in consequence. The basilisk, for all its fangs and coils, becomes less of a killer and more of a paper tiger, terrifying on the surface but empty beneath. Number 20. How did Ginny enter the chamber without Parseltongue? In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, one of the strangest inconsistencies lies hidden beneath the drama of the monster attacks, the mystery of the heir of Slytherin, and the dark allure of Tom Riddle's diary. It's the quiet, creeping question no one dares to voice. How did Ginny Weasley, a nervous first-year student, manage to repeatedly enter the Chamber of Secrets without a single soul noticing? The entrance to the chamber is well guarded by secrecy and magic, sealed behind a sink in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, requiring the use of Parseltongue to open. And yet, Ginny accessed it multiple times, committed magical vandalism, unleashed a deadly basilisk, and finally collapsed inside the chamber itself, all without triggering suspicion from the staff, ghosts, or enchanted protections of Hogwarts. This oddity becomes all the more pronounced when we remember that Ginny was 11 years old, new to the school, and far from a master of subterfuge. She wasn't an animagus, a skilled duelist, or even particularly bold at that stage in her life. She was scared, vulnerable, and deeply isolated, and yet, under the influence of Tom Riddle's diary, she accomplished a series of dangerous and highly visible acts. "I found it in one of my school books," she later explains to Harry. "I started writing in it, and it wrote back." But what follows isn't just a story of mind control, it's a logistical mystery. For Riddle, possessing Ginny to open the chamber, someone had to speak Parseltongue to the sink. Ginny, under no circumstances, would have known how to do that on her own. The book describes the entrance vividly. Harry hissed, and the tap glowed with a brilliant white light and began to spin. Next second, the sink began to move. The sink vanished, and a large pipe opened up. It was a magical mechanism triggered by snake language. Only a Parselmouth could unlock it. So how, exactly, did Ginny Weasley manage to access the chamber in the first place? Did Tom Riddle, possessing her through the diary, speak Parseltongue through her mouth? Could a possessed host produce a magical effect that only a bloodline-specific ability allows? That alone is never fully explained. But even if we accept that possession allowed Ginny to speak Parseltongue unconsciously, the questions multiply. Moaning Myrtle, the ghost who haunts the girls' bathroom, famously guards the location. She notices Harry and Ron immediately when they enter her domain. She complains bitterly about every intrusion. "Oh, it's you?" she groans, annoyed by even the most minor disturbance. Yet somehow, Ginny Weasley crept into the bathroom multiple times and stood before the enchanted sink long enough to hiss at it and descend through a vanishing tunnel, and Myrtle never said a word about it. Myrtle didn't mention strange noises. She didn't see the entrance being used. She didn't report anything odd despite being the single ghost who literally lives in the chamber's entryway. How is that possible? Filch, the caretaker of Hogwarts, is another glaring omission in this puzzle. He is paranoid, obsessive, and constantly prowling the corridors in search of mischief. He found the first message written on the wall. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware," and was beside himself with rage. And yet he never caught Ginny wandering toward the second-floor girls' bathroom at night, never found her returning disoriented or splattered with paint or basilisk slime. For a man with such obsessive dedication to cleanliness and order, his complete ignorance of Ginny's nightly escapades is bizarre, especially considering that Ginny, as a first year, wouldn't have known any stealth spells or disillusionment charms. It's not only Filch and Myrtle. The entire magical architecture of Hogwarts seems to have failed in the face of this riddle. The Marauders map, while not widely known, did exist at the time, owned by Fred and George Weasley. They used it frequently, even joked about knowing where Percy was sneaking off. Did they never spot their little sister disappearing into the wall of the second-floor bathroom and vanishing from the map altogether? Did they never see the name Tom Riddle glowing beside hers, overlapping her movements as he possessed her? Even if they didn't know what it meant, wouldn't two mischievous brothers at least wonder why their sister kept visiting a bathroom haunted by a shrieking ghost? Even more unsettling is the idea that no magical wards were triggered by a student descending into an ancient, lethal chamber that had been sealed for centuries. Hogwarts is a castle built with enchantments layered upon enchantments. It detects underage magic, shifts its staircases, and protects against unregistered animagi. And yet it couldn't detect that a student had entered a legendary cursed room repeatedly while under the mental control of a dark wizard. That's not just a plot hole. It's a disturbing blind spot in the magical protection of a school full of children. And there's the Basilisk. Ginny released it from the chamber multiple times, allowing it to slither through the school's plumbing, attacking students. The Basilisk kills people. Most of the time it only petrifies because no one looks it in the eyes. But how did Ginny, who didn't even know how to control a wand properly yet, know when and how to unleash the monster without being devoured herself? Did Tom Riddle guide her step by step? Did he command the Basilisk remotely, or did she enter the chamber each time to give it instructions in Parseltongue? And if so, how could she have spoken snake language repeatedly convincingly while under Riddle's spell without being detected? Perhaps the strangest moment of all comes when Ginny is finally discovered unconscious in the chamber. Her disappearance causes a full-scale panic, yet it seems to be the first time anyone even realizes she's connected to the chamber at all. Professor McGonagall is shocked. Arthur and Molly Weasley are summoned in horror. But for weeks Ginny had been behaving erratically, acting withdrawn, waking up with paint on her hands, vanishing for hours. Percy noticed but assumed it was about a crush. How could no one have connected the dots, especially in a castle where portraits gossip, ghosts linger, and even the staircases have opinions? The diary's power is terrifying, yes, but the silence around Ginny's movements makes it even more terrifying. It suggests that Hogwarts is a place where dark magic can operate completely undetected if it's clever enough, where a young girl can be puppeteered into doing a monster's bidding, and no one will notice until it's too late. "I suppose the diary must have drained the life out of her," says Dumbledore later. But the more haunting truth might be this: the school drained the watchfulness out of its protectors. Let's not forget that Dumbledore himself knew the chamber existed. He was a transfiguration professor at Hogwarts when Myrtle was killed. He always suspected Tom Riddle, and yet, during the second wave of attacks, he didn't station guards near the rumoured entrance. He didn't monitor the girl, who looked increasingly pale and haunted. He didn't question why the bathroom where a girl died decades ago suddenly became the epicentre of magical disturbances. His inaction adds another layer to the mystery. Was he hoping to see what would unfold? Was he testing Harry or watching for signs of Voldemort's return? Whatever the reason, the price was nearly Ginny's life. The idea that Ginny opened the chamber unnoticed isn't just a plot hole. It's a narrative crack that reveals something deeper about Hogwarts and the people in charge of it. It shows us a system so focused on the obvious threats, Slytherin's bloodlines, duels and dark marks, that it missed the quiet, trembling child who walked into a bathroom and never came back the same. It makes us wonder how many other students might have hidden dark secrets, suffered in silence, or served a greater evil right under everyone's noses. We are told again and again that Hogwarts is the safest place in the wizarding world, but Ginny's descent into the chamber proves otherwise. A place with so much magic, so many eyes and so many ancient protections, failed to see one of its most vulnerable students being slowly consumed by a dark force. It failed to see her walking, possessed, into the belly of the beast. It failed to hear her screams until Harry arrived to face the serpent himself. And yet, after all this, the school resumed its term as if nothing had happened. Ginny recovered. The diary was destroyed, no public inquiry was made, no new protections were added to the chamber's entrance. The bathroom remained haunted and open. One can't help but feel a shiver thinking about it. The real secret of the chamber may not have been the Basilisk or even Tom Riddle, it was how easily darkness passed among them, in plain sight, unchallenged, and how Ginny, silent and unnoticed, was the proof. Number 21, Gilderoy Lockhart's very convenient amnesia. Gilderoy Lockhart stood at the heart of the second book as both comic relief and cautionary tale, a man so enamoured with fame that he built a legacy entirely upon stolen achievements. Yet for a character whose entire career hinged upon the memory charm, Obliviate, his final downfall felt jarringly inconsistent. When he attempted to erase Harry and Ron's memories in the Chamber of Secrets, the spell rebounded and obliterated his own mind, leaving him lost and fragmented. It's a moment intended to be ironic, perhaps even karmic. But for those paying attention, it raises a perplexing question. If Lockhart was a master of this specific charm, why did it fail him so catastrophically? We know from the Chamber of Secrets that Lockhart boasted a long list of literary triumphs, wanderings with werewolves, gadding with ghouls and travels with trolls, none of which he actually earned. According to his own confession, he discovered that memory charms were powerful enough to allow him to steal other people's stories and erase their recollection of the truth. "It's really quite simple," he explained. "I do the thing with the wand, and they just forget." This was his bread and butter, his signature move. And if he was anything, he was consistent in using Obliviate with chilling precision. Lockhart's ability to wield this charm was not a casual skill. He used it multiple times on skilled and experienced witches and wizards, seasoned adventurers no less, who had survived harrowing magical encounters. These weren't gullible muggles, they were magical folk, likely with defensive skills of their own. Yet Lockhart succeeded in every case. The charm was not just functional, it was perfected to a degree that allowed him to rewrite lives without suspicion. This level of manipulation requires more than a passing familiarity with memory magic. It demands expertise. So when we arrive at the moment in the tunnels beneath Hogwarts where Lockhart seizes Ron's broken wand and declares he'll erase their memories to save his secret, we're primed for another successful execution, but instead the spell backfires dramatically. The wand explodes, Lockhart is thrown across the chamber and permanently loses his memory. His eyes are vacant and confused, the book tells us. He doesn't seem to know who he is. The irony is sharp, but the mechanics of the moment feel suspiciously off-kilter. A wizard of Lockhart's apparent experience should have recognized the risk of using a wand that wasn't his own, especially a visibly damaged one. Wands are not interchangeable. They are deeply personal instruments bonded to their owners and often resistant to others' use. Even Ron, who owned the wand, struggled with its functionality. In the Chamber of Secrets, it's established early that Ron's wand is damaged and held together with spellotape, frequently causing spells to go awry. Lockhart, presumably an expert in magical performance, should have sensed the instability. And yet he proceeds anyway, as though his arrogance has blinded him not just to risk, but to basic magical awareness. This leads us to a deeper question. Was Lockhart ever a real expert at all? Or was he merely good at copying, rehearsing, and imitating confidence? The more we examine his behavior throughout the book, the more it becomes clear that Lockhart might have had an impressive grasp of memory charms in theory, but lacked a fundamental understanding of magical mechanics. His entire persona was constructed on mimicry, not mastery. Throughout the story, Lockhart demonstrates a profound lack of practical magical skill. He fails to mend Harry's broken arm correctly, removing the bones entirely instead. He's unable to control Cornish pixies in his own classroom. He stumbles through every classroom demonstration, relying on spectacle over substance. The students quickly lose respect for him, and the staff barely tolerates his presence. Professor Snape, in particular, sneers at Lockhart's incompetence, openly challenging him during the dueling club fiasco. The evidence stacks against Lockhart not as a fallen genius, but as a fraud lucky enough to never be tested until now. This context makes the failure of the Obliviate spell more understandable. Perhaps Lockhart could only perform the spell under ideal conditions, when he had his own wand, when the target was unarmed, unaware, or trusting. Down in the chamber, none of those conditions applied. The wand was broken, the targets were alert and resistant, and the atmosphere was tense and unpredictable. The spell required finesse, yet Lockhart never had to demonstrate finesse before. He was a stage magician thrown into a battlefield. Moreover, his overconfidence seems to have clouded even the most basic magical judgment. In his desperation to silence Harry and Ron, he reached for the first available weapon, Ron's mangled wand, without pausing to consider the consequences. He spoke the incantation with bravado, never once suspecting that the wand might behave erratically. The wand exploded with the force of a small bomb, J.K. Rowling writes. It's a critical turning point, not just for the plot, but for Lockhart as a character. The very charm that allowed him to climb to fame now ensures his ruin. Yet there's an uncomfortable absurdity in how absolute his downfall is. Other victims of magical mishaps recover, with time and treatment. Even serious spell damage can often be undone at St. Mungo's. George Weasley, for instance, permanently loses an ear, but his personality remains intact. Neville's parents suffer from long-term memory loss after sustained torture, but their condition is portrayed as extremely rare and severe. For Lockhart to suffer total amnesia from a single spell gone wrong feels disproportionate, unless his knowledge of the spell was superficial all along. There's also the mystery of why the spell affected him, and not Harry or Ron. If the wand was faulty, logic would suggest danger for everyone in the room, and yet it seems to have targeted Lockhart alone. Could it be that Lockhart, lacking a true connection to the wand, absorbed the full force of its magical backlash? Perhaps, too, the spell rebounded internally because Lockhart's intent was misaligned with the wand's allegiance. Wands have shown awareness of their user's intentions before. Harry's own wand acted independently to protect him from Voldemort. Could Ron's wand, loyal to him, have instinctively turned against Lockhart's deceit? The irreversible nature of the memory loss raises another question. What does it say about the ethics of memory magic in the wizarding world? Lockhart used Obliviate to silence, control, and manipulate people. His victims were left powerless and disoriented, stripped of their life stories. Yet there appears to be no oversight, no ministry regulation, no public outcry. Memory modification is treated casually, often humorously, in the series, but Lockhart's fate exposes its darker implications. It's poetic justice, perhaps, that the abuser of memories loses his own, but it's also a chilling reminder of how fragile the mind becomes when tampered with. Lockhart's condition in Order of the Phoenix, when we see him again in St. Mungo's, is almost tragic. He signs autographs reflexively, clings to fragments of his old identity, and shows flashes of his former vanity. But there's nothing left of the man who once charmed a nation. He still receives fan mail, the healer tells us, a sentence both sad and absurd. It suggests that even in madness, Lockhart remains a prisoner of the persona he created. He is no longer a fraud because there is no self left to deceive. His fame lives on, hollow and haunting. One might ask then whether Lockhart's fate was truly an accident or a quiet verdict from the magical world itself. In a universe where sentient wands, subconscious magic, and deep-rooted intentions guide outcomes, perhaps the explosion was not just a random burst of broken wood and spellcraft. Maybe it was justice cloaked in chaos. Maybe the wand, the magic, the very fabric of Hogwarts rejected Lockhart's fraudulence and cast him into oblivion with poetic finality. And perhaps that's the final irony of Gilderoy Lockhart's story. The master of false memories becomes the ultimate victim of his own lie. He built an empire by erasing the truth. In the end, truth erased him. Number 22, why is brewing dangerous? Potions not a problem. Of all the strange inconsistencies in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the brewing of Polyjuice potion by a group of 12-year-olds inside a school toilet must rank among the most unsettling. One would think that Hogwarts, with its vaulted ceilings and endless staircases, would at least exercise some control over the brewing of highly advanced, potentially dangerous potions. But no, Hermione Granger, Harry Potter, and Ron Weasley not only steal from Professor Snape's private stores, an offence that should merit immediate expulsion. They also managed to brew a transformation potion in secret, without supervision, for weeks on end. The end result? A blown-up bathroom, a hospitalized student, and zero consequences. It wasn't just a simple potion. It was Polyjuice potion, a substance so advanced that even many adult wizards would hesitate before attempting it. Hermione herself said it would take over a month to brew. It required fluxweed picked at the full moon, lacewing flies stewed for 21 days, shredded boomslang skin, and a piece of the person one wanted to transform into. According to Moste Potente Potions, a book found in the restricted section of the library, the potion is not only difficult but dangerous. Yet these children were allowed access to this book with nothing more than a signed note from a professor who had no idea what they actually intended to do with it. It was Hermione's idea, of course, the brightest witch of her age and perhaps the most stubborn. She forged ahead with the plan, convinced that transforming into Slytherin students would bring them closer to the truth about the chamber. Her intentions were noble, but that's precisely what makes the lack of adult intervention so alarming. She ended up accidentally using a cat hair and spent weeks in the hospital wing with partial feline features. According to the book, Hermione lay in a hospital bed, her face covered with fur, her eyes yellow and slitted, her tail swishing beneath the sheets. and the staff, concerned perhaps, but furious? Punitive? Absolutely not. If any ordinary schoolchild were caught cooking meth in the chemistry lab after hours, there would be headlines. Yet in the magical world, 3 students concoct a powerful and potentially irreversible potion in a disused girl's bathroom, and no one says a word. It's not just about breaking the rules, it's about the absence of them. The complete lack of oversight, no protective spells, no alarm charms on dangerous ingredients, no system in place to prevent children from literally transforming their bodies into other people. The implications are terrifying. The question isn't just about this one event. It's about what this moment reveals. If these first years, and let's not forget, they were first years not long ago, can successfully brew a Polyjuice potion, what's stopping other students from experimenting on their own? What's preventing someone like Draco Malfoy from mixing up a poison in his dormitory and slipping it into someone's goblet? Where's the line between mischief and catastrophe? The fact that no teacher noticed anything despite the trio sneaking off for ingredients, loitering in a forbidden bathroom for hours, and having visible side effects from their potion suggests that Hogwarts simply has no effective security protocols in place for potion making. Even more concerning is the implication for students like Fred and George Weasley. Mischievous, brilliant and daring, the twins are known for their love of experimentation. They eventually create an entire joke shop based on their inventions. But if Hermione was able to brew Polyjuice potion with only a library book and some stolen ingredients, what stopped Fred and George from crafting a love potion strong enough to manipulate someone's will, or an invisibility elixir better than Harry's cloak? It's not that they lacked skill. Clearly, they didn't. So we must ask, are these potions too dangerous to attempt, or has the school simply failed to educate its students on the real consequences of misusing them? There's an unsettling void at the heart of this problem, the absence of any punishment. Snape, known for his strictness and harsh discipline, does nothing when he finds out his ingredients were stolen. In fact, he knows Harry was involved. During one confrontation, Snape hisses, "Someone has been stealing boomslang skin and gillyweed from my stores." He looks directly at Harry but takes no action. Why? Was he afraid of what Dumbledore might say? Was he more focused on catching the heir of Slytherin than disciplining reckless students? Or did the school's general negligence extend even to the potion master? The real question is this. What if it hadn't been Harry, Ron and Hermione? What if it had been Pansy Parkinson or Vincent Crabbe? Would the school have reacted differently? Would the Ministry of Magic have intervened if the incident had resulted in death or permanent injury? Because let's be honest, if Hermione had used a hair from a cursed creature, or if one ingredient had been added in the wrong quantity, the results could have been fatal. The students didn't have a lab, didn't have protective equipment, and had no healer on standby, just faith in a recipe and a lot of teenage confidence. Let's also not forget Moaning Myrtle. The ghost of a dead student was living in that bathroom the entire time, and no teacher even checked in on her. The fact that her bathroom was repurposed as a secret laboratory for illegal potion making and no one noticed says a great deal about how Hogwarts treats both its ghosts and its rulebook. If she hadn't been there to scream about the explosion that sent Hermione to the hospital, would anyone have ever found out? Polyjuice potion is not just a school project. It is a weapon of deception. With it, any student can impersonate a teacher, enter a forbidden room, frame another student, or even escape the castle. That 3 children managed to do all of this, and walk away without a single detention, is not a mark of brilliance. It's an indictment of Hogwarts itself, of Dumbledore's lax policies, of the teachers' failure to monitor, and of a magical education system that seems to prize daring over safety. This wasn't the only time Hogwarts showed apathy toward dangerous magic, but it was certainly one of the clearest. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry uses a mysterious, unverified spell from a textbook, Sectum Sempra, and seriously injures Draco. Again, there are no long-term consequences. Why is it that in a school where everything is magical, there are so few safeguards? Why is Polyjuice potion kept in a student-accessible book? Why are lethal spells left in used textbooks? Why are dangerous ingredients stored where children can reach them? Imagine a world in which this incident had ended differently. If Hermione had died in that bathroom from a botched transformation, would Dumbledore have taken responsibility? Would Snape have explained why his stores weren't locked or warded? Would McGonagall have admitted that perhaps the restricted section needed more than just a professor's signature? There are no clear answers because no one ever asked the questions, not in the story and not in the school. Even Madame Pomfrey, the ever-reliable matron of the hospital wing, treats Hermione's cat-like features with professional calm. She says nothing about how it happened, raises no alarm, files no report. She just heals and moves on. It's as though near-fatal magical accidents are simply part of the curriculum. One wonders how many other students in the past decades suffered mysterious transformations or potions-related injuries, only for the staff to quietly patch them up and look the other way. In hindsight, this moment reveals something more disturbing than just rule-breaking. It exposes the core truth about Hogwarts. It is a place of great learning and even greater risk, a school that champions bravery, cleverness, and ambition, but where common sense takes a back seat to narrative momentum. If Harry, Hermione, and Ron had died in that bathroom, would they have become martyrs or cautionary tales? That we even have to ask is proof enough that the system is broken. And so we return to Fred and George. If they had wanted to, they could have brewed an elixir that erased memories, forged identities, or even faked deaths. But they didn't. Not because it was illegal, not because it was impossible, but because perhaps they understood something the staff never did, that some lines shouldn't be crossed, even if the school never told them where those lines were. Number 23. How did Fawkes carry everyone out of the chamber? The chamber echoed with the sounds of dripping water and fading magic. The basilisk lay slain, its monstrous coils strewn across the stone floor. Harry Potter stood trembling beside the lifeless body of the great serpent, the sword of Godric Gryffindor clutched tightly in his bloodied hand. Ginny Weasley lay pale and unconscious at his feet, the destroyed diary of Tom Riddle smouldering nearby, and Fawkes, the majestic phoenix of Albus Dumbledore, perched quietly on a rock, watching. Everything about this scene breathed heroism and wonder. Yet when the dust of magic settled and the adrenaline ebbed away, a strange question lingered in the silence that followed. How exactly did they all get out? According to the text, Fawkes, in a moment of quiet glory, carried them out of the Chamber of Secrets. Not just Harry and Ginny, but also Ron Weasley and Gilderoy Lockhart, the latter now memoryless and completely helpless. 4 people, plus a giant sword, a destroyed diary, and possibly a hefty portion of psychological trauma, all hoisted into the air by a single bird. This was not just an awe-inspiring moment of magic, it was a logistical riddle tucked within a mythological miracle. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Rowling writes, Fawkes took flight. He flew straight at Harry. The phoenix landed softly on his shoulder. Then, incredible though it was, he seemed to become incredibly light, as though some unseen force had taken away the weight of his body. This line is poetic, enchanting, and quintessentially magical. Yet it invites curiosity rather than closure. Harry may have felt weightless, but what about Ginny's limp form? What about Lockhart, who was presumably dead weight both mentally and physically? And what about Ron, the ever-loyal friend who had stayed behind with a pile of rubble and a wand that could backfire at any second? Fawkes is not an ordinary creature, of course. As a phoenix, he is bound by rules of magic that defy biology and gravity. Phoenixes can carry immensely heavy loads, Rowling hints, and their tears have healing powers. Fawkes had already proven his miraculous nature by blinding the Basilisk and delivering the sorting hat to Harry, from which the sword had appeared. But was the Phoenix's strength truly limitless? In mythology, phoenixes are symbols of rebirth and eternity, not forklifts. It's worth noting that Rowling never specifies how Fawkes performs this feat of extraction. The narrative glides over the moment with the ease of a magician waving away the trick. Fawkes took off again and soared in a great arc above them. Then, clutching the top of Harry's robes in his talons, he flew upwards, dragging Harry with him. Ginny, Ron and Lockhart followed somehow. That final word, somehow, is doing a tremendous amount of work. It's the narrative equivalent of a magician's cape. It distracts, conceals, and defers the question of plausibility to a vague trust in wonder. But somehow is not a satisfying explanation, especially in a universe that otherwise takes pride in its internal logic. Rowling built the magical world of Hogwarts with astonishing consistency: laws of transfiguration, limitations of apparition, regulated magical creatures, and the complex rules governing spells and their consequences. Even time-turners were carefully restricted. Yet here, in the climax of the second book, she leans on a mystical exception that feels like it breaks the quiet covenant she made with the reader. Consider the weight involved. Ginny, though 11, is unconscious and needs to be carried. Ron is healthy but likely in no shape to climb ropes or navigate stone shafts. Lockhart, now mentally incapacitated, would be as cooperative as a sack of potatoes. And Harry, though standing, is bleeding, exhausted, and holding a sword. Together, this group represents not only significant physical weight but also logistical complexity. How did Fawkes carry them all simultaneously? Did he make multiple trips? Did he conjure some unseen magical platform? Did he somehow enchant their bodies to float upward behind him like feathered puppets? There is also the structural challenge. The entrance to the chamber is a long vertical tunnel behind the sink in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Harry and Ron slid down that tunnel earlier in the book, implying it is steep, narrow and deep. Climbing back up would be near impossible without magical assistance. Fawkes is a bird, not a crane. Even if we accept that he could lift one or two people, how would he manage an entire party up a sheer shaft? Another theory suggests that Fawkes did not physically carry them at all. Perhaps he used some form of advanced phoenix magic, levitation, mass apparition, or even temporary weightlessness. But the books are clear. Phoenixes cannot apparate. Apparition is a wizarding skill with strict limitations, and magical creatures are not known to perform it. Moreover, if Fawkes had the power to make people weightless or fly unaided, why would he clutch Harry's robe in his talons, as if dragging him upward? Rowling's use of Fawkes in this moment seems less about realism and more about emotional symbolism. Fawkes is the embodiment of Dumbledore's faith in Harry, a creature of purity and resurrection. His appearance in the chamber is not meant to be analysed with physics or logic, but felt with the heart. He brings light to the darkest place, healing to the wounded, and salvation to the lost. In literary terms, he is a deus ex machina, but a feathered one, cloaked in enough mystique to mask his function. Still, as readers mature and revisit the series, questions like this begin to ripple through the polished surface of the narrative, in the same way fans question why the Time Turner wasn't used to save Cedric Diggory, or why Polyjuice Potion gives you body shape but not voice. The question of Fawkes and the escape from the chamber lingers like a spell miscast. It doesn't ruin the story, but it introduces a flicker of disbelief in a world that otherwise invites total immersion. This isn't a rare moment in the Harry Potter series. Occasionally, Rowling chooses emotion and momentum over consistency. It's a justifiable artistic decision, one that elevates the drama but sacrifices a bit of logic. And for a children's novel, especially one culminating in a life-and-death battle, perhaps a magical bird lifting 4 people to safety is forgivable, even necessary. But for a world that insists on magical laws, the moment deserves scrutiny. One might even compare it to the use of the night bus in The Prisoner of Azkaban. There, too, magic offers a sudden and convenient solution to a difficult situation. But the difference is in the setup. The night bus is explained, regulated, and referenced again. Fawkes' strength, meanwhile, is never addressed beyond this one miracle. It is a narrative tool that appears only when needed, then fades into the background like a dream half remembered. Another detail worth noting is that Ron and Lockhart are entirely absent from the rescue scene. We never witness their physical movement, hear their thoughts, or learn how they are being transported. It's as if the narrative, so rich in earlier chapters, suddenly shifts into stage directions. Harry goes up, others follow, scene ends. The reader is left to fill in the blanks, relying on faith in the author's hand rather than trust in the text. That is perhaps the ultimate irony of this moment. In a story about belief in friends, belief in oneself, belief in magic, this scene requires the reader to suspend disbelief entirely. We are asked to accept that a single bird can lift multiple humans out of a subterranean chamber across a vertical shaft, with no visible effort, no explanation, and no precedent. It is not a failure of writing, but a conscious gamble, a choice to prioritize narrative beauty over structural logic. And it works. Emotionally, it works. Fawkes glows in memory, not as an implausible engine of rescue, but as the saviour who arrives in Harry's darkest hour. His tears heal wounds that potions cannot. His song gives courage in the face of death. His flight is not just upward, but symbolic, an ascent from despair to hope. But beneath that radiant symbolism lies a question that refuses to die. How did he do it? Perhaps some mysteries in the wizarding world are meant to remain unanswered. Perhaps, like the magic itself, the mechanics are less important than the meaning. But as readers, especially those who seek logic in even the most enchanted tales, we are left with the image of a lone bird lifting the weight of 4 people into the air. And we wonder, not with cynicism, but with curiosity, where exactly do we draw the line between magic and miracle? Number 24. Why didn't the ghosts help? The panic in Hogwarts was undeniable. Students walked in hushed dread, teachers huddled behind closed doors, and the very walls of the ancient castle echoed with the whispers of fear. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened again, and no one felt safe. Yet through all this rising terror, the most silent observers, the ghosts of Hogwarts, remained just that, silent. Their inaction becomes even more perplexing when one recalls their abilities. They could pass through walls, float invisibly above students, observe every corner of the castle with a view unattainable to the living. And yet, while students were petrified and rumours of a monster roamed unchecked, the ghosts did nothing. It is hard to ignore the presence of Professor Binns, the ghostly history of magic teacher who continued to drone through his lessons as if the danger unfolding around him was little more than a footnote in a dusty old scroll. When Hermione dared to ask him about the Chamber of Secrets, he scoffed at the very notion of it being real. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets is, as I have already told you, a myth, he said coldly, dismissing the idea without ever considering that as a ghost he might have the tools to investigate beyond the reach of the living. But why didn't he bother to confirm anything for himself? Binns was perfectly capable of gliding through the dungeons, scouring the ancient plumbing, or examining restricted parts of the castle. He chose not to. Then there is the Bloody Baron, the Slytherin house ghost. A menacing, silent figure with chains clinking faintly as he glides, he commands enough fear among even the ghosts themselves to keep Peeves in check. The Basilisk, the monster from the chamber, was supposedly moving through pipes under the school. If even one ghost had ventured to investigate the plumbing or lurked in the bowels of the castle, perhaps some clue could have been found. Why didn't the Bloody Baron, with all his allegiance to Slytherin House, at least question the students of his own house? Surely, if anyone knew of the Chamber's secrets, it would be a Slytherin. but instead the Baron remained his usual mute, passive self, as petrified in behaviour as the victims lying in the hospital wing. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, better known as Nearly Headless Nick, did show a fleeting interest, right before he himself was petrified. But even that brief concern was largely performative, more to show empathy toward Gryffindor students than to actually act. Prior to his own incapacitation, Nick could have used his freedom of movement to explore the locations where attacks occurred, or perhaps hover in the shadows to observe if anything suspicious took place near the bathrooms, hallways, or even the library. Instead, he spent his time organizing his Death Day party, a gathering of moaning phantoms who preferred to discuss the inconveniences of incorporeality rather than the crisis surrounding them. Moaning Myrtle is the most glaring example of ghostly indifference, or perhaps ghostly ignorance. Her bathroom was the very gateway to the Chamber of Secrets, yet Myrtle only wailed endlessly about how Olive Hornby teased her, never seeming to notice the presence of a giant serpent slithering past. In her own words, "I remember someone coming in, but they didn't say anything, they just went to the sink." She noticed someone walking in, but failed to consider that maybe she should investigate the matter further. Myrtle, who exists trapped in that very lavatory, failed to notice that the sink concealed an entrance to the most dangerous secret in Hogwarts, and no one, ghost or human, thought to ask her meaningful questions about it until the situation had escalated beyond control. What makes this even more strange is how active the ghosts are in other moments. In the Sorcerer's Stone, they pop in and out of walls to gossip, tease students, or even perform festive displays during Halloween. Peeves, though technically not a ghost, is able to spot people coming and going, especially when they are sneaking around. He causes mischief, reports to the Bloody Baron, and always seems to be where he isn't wanted. Surely Peeves could have noticed a basilisk moving through pipes, or at the very least heard the screams of students just before they were petrified. But again, he did nothing. Not a single spirit stirred to intervene. Perhaps the question is not simply why didn't they act, but why were they written to be so indifferent? In a world meticulously crafted with magical logic, the ghosts are one of the few entities that transcend boundaries. They are not bound by doors, by time, or by the physical constraints of mortality. When Justin Finch-Fletchley and Nearly Headless Nick were found petrified, no ghost took that as a signal to organize, coordinate, or warn the staff. There was no ghostly patrol, no spectral investigation. Even Dumbledore, the most perceptive of all, did not commission any ghost to help monitor the school. The silence of the Grey Lady, the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower, is perhaps the most disturbing of all. Known for her quiet, reflective demeanour, she harbours secrets even from her own house. In the final book, her knowledge of the lost diadem becomes vital. Yet during the events of the Chamber of Secrets, she was nowhere to be found. A ghost who knows the history of magical artifacts, who understands secret rooms and hidden legacies, says absolutely nothing. Her insight could have proven invaluable if only she had spoken. There is also the issue of the ghosts' historical memory. Many of them have roamed the castle for centuries. Professor Binns himself died in his sleep and continued teaching without realizing he was dead. This suggests a certain level of detachment, a ghostly haze of indifference. But even detachment does not equate to blindness. Ghosts remember their past lives. Binns taught history, Nick remembered his failed execution, and Myrtle remembered her death. That memory alone should have made her a prime witness. Instead, it was left to Harry and Ron to piece together what no adult or ghost could or would say. Even when Harry hears the voice of the basilisk, the chilling whisper of "Come to me, let me rip you," it's clear that something invisible, something ancient, is moving through the walls. Any ghost, by simply listening or floating near the plumbing, might have heard it too. And unlike students or teachers, they wouldn't have been in danger. Ghosts cannot be killed by a basilisk stare. They are already dead. They had nothing to fear and everything to gain by investigating. but their absence during these moments becomes one of the most baffling silences in the entire series. In a book where magic and logic walk hand in hand, the behavior of the ghosts stands out as implausible. It is almost as if the story forgets their usefulness until a comic or atmospheric moment demands their presence. The ghosts decorate the narrative with Gothic charm, but fail to serve the very functions their nature allows. The mystery of the chamber could have been unravelled faster, with fewer victims, had even one ghost acted beyond their moaning routines and melancholy. It's not just a missed opportunity for the characters, but a missed opportunity for the story itself. Imagine Professor Binns floating through ancient stonework, discovering runes or secrets forgotten. Imagine the Bloody Baron standing guard over Slytherin's entrance, daring any heir to pass. Imagine Myrtle realizing the monster came through her pipes, finally having her moment to make a difference in death. These were all possibilities that were never explored, leaving readers with a lingering sense of why not. When Hermione was attacked, one might have expected the ghosts to become more involved, if only out of respect for her intelligence and character. Yet not one spectral figure showed concern. Not even Nick, whose decapitated body shared a hallway with her, thought to raise the alarm. Ghosts are known to be emotional. They sulk, rage, and grieve, but here they were devoid of reaction. The events of the Chamber of Secrets left a trail of unanswered questions, but few are as frustrating as the ghostly inaction. For a castle that never sleeps, watched by spirits who never rest, it is difficult to believe that no phantom saw anything, knew anything, or cared enough to stop what was happening. The ghosts of Hogwarts, who see without being seen, were blind at the very moment they were needed most. Number 25. Why didn't anyone check the pipes? In the shadowed hallways of Hogwarts, fear had begun to take root. The first attack was sudden and alarming. Mrs. Norris, Filch's beloved cat, found petrified in the corridor near a message scrawled in blood. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. This alone should have raised every alarm in the adult world of the school. Something was clearly moving within the castle, something unseen, something dangerous. And yet, despite the obvious signs, despite the whispers in the dark and the terrified glances of students, no one thought to inspect the very bones of the building, the pipes, the vents, the hidden arteries through which the true threat slithered. The Basilisk, as revealed later, travelled through the plumbing system of Hogwarts. It was not an ethereal force or an invisible spell. It had a physical body, albeit enormous and deadly, and it moved with sound and fury, albeit in a language only Parselmouths could understand. It made noises, and those noises were heard. "It moves in the walls," Harry said, a line that should have sent any adult in the castle into action. A living creature was travelling behind the stonework, its hissing echoing through the ancient passages. Why didn't anyone think to trace those sounds? Dumbledore, often hailed as the greatest wizard of his time, was still the headmaster. He had faced Gellert Grindelwald, held the Elder Wand, and was feared by Voldemort himself. And yet even he seemed to dismiss the idea of a creature moving through the school's infrastructure. He removed himself from Hogwarts after pressure from the governors, but even before that there's no indication that he ordered a magical inspection of the walls, the piping, the vents. A simple detection spell could have uncovered unusual movement or magical signatures inside the walls. But no such thing was done. Professor McGonagall, usually the sharpest and most practical mind in the staff, also missed the glaring clues. Her concern for student safety was genuine. She was visibly shaken by the attacks. Yet her response was mainly focused on increased patrols and suspensions of activities. When the attacks continued, she even spoke of possibly closing the school. But not once is it mentioned that she or any staff member conducted a search of the infrastructure. The source of the danger was being ignored, as if no one believed a monster could move within the very walls of the castle. Professor Snape, ever suspicious, ever brooding in the shadows, might have been expected to take independent action. He distrusted Harry and often accused him of being involved in the chaos, but even Snape, the cunning and inquisitive potions master, failed to consider that a physical creature could be using the plumbing to travel unseen. Surely someone with his knowledge of potions, chemicals, and the dark arts would understand how something could be moving undetected. Surely someone who worked in the dungeons would hear the faint sounds of scraping and hissing through stone. But he did not act. Then there is Argus Filch, the caretaker of the castle, a man obsessed with keeping the school clean and orderly. He knew every pipe, every hidden crawl space, every vent. If there was any adult who could have heard something strange in the plumbing, it was him. And he did hear something. His own cat was petrified, and he was devastated. But he was dismissed, mocked for being a squib. No one thought to ask Filch whether he had noticed strange movements in the walls or heard unfamiliar sounds. His knowledge of the school's infrastructure was never utilized. It wasn't only that no one thought to inspect the pipes, it's that they didn't even try to investigate the pattern of the attacks. Every victim had been near plumbing when attacked. Colin Creevey with his camera, Justin Finch-Fletchley and nearly headless Nick near a water source, Hermione with a mirror in her hand close to a bathroom. The clues were there, scattered like breadcrumbs. Yet the adults failed to follow them. It's as if they were waiting for the mystery to solve itself or for the monster to stop. They reacted rather than acted. The most glaring oversight was Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. A ghost, tied forever to the memory of her death, haunted the same bathroom where one of the messages appeared, and she told Harry and Ron in plain words that she had seen large yellow eyes before she died. How could no one else have spoken to her? She was a witness, a ghost witness. Her story was directly connected to the original opening of the chamber, and yet she remained isolated, overlooked, her bathroom deemed useless and creepy rather than valuable to the investigation. The failure to inspect the school's plumbing becomes even more egregious when considering that Hogwarts is a magical castle filled with enchantments and sentient objects. Surely there were spells that could detect anomalies in the building's magical structure. Surely the castle itself, with its portraits and shifting staircases, could have offered a hint. Did no one think to ask the portraits what they had seen? Did no one consider using spells like Revelio or Hominum Revelio to check for hidden beings? A basilisk is enormous. It could not simply pass through narrow pipes like a snake. Its movement must have left magical traces. Even the concept of closing off the lower levels was ignored. After the second or third attack, logic would dictate sealing off areas near plumbing or installing enchantments to guard passageways. But students continued to wander freely in vulnerable areas. Only after Hermione was attacked did the school truly descend into panic, and by then it was almost too late. If the creature had killed instead of petrifying, Hogwarts would have faced multiple funerals. And yet precautionary actions remained superficial. It's almost ironic that Gilderoy Lockhart, the most incompetent of the professors, was the one sent to handle the final crisis. He bragged about his ability to find the chamber, though he had no idea how to do it. But even in his cowardice, he stumbled upon something vital, access to the secret passage behind Myrtle's sink. It wasn't he who found it, but Ron and Harry. Two children had to do the thinking that no adult did. They listened to the clues, pieced together the evidence, and acted while everyone else hesitated. Dobby, the house elf, had tried to warn Harry. He hinted at the terror brewing within Hogwarts. When Harry asked if there was a creature involved, Dobby's reaction was telling. House elves often work in the hidden places of the castle, maintaining the kitchens and cleaning the corridors. If anyone knew that something monstrous was moving through the pipes, it was the elves. But their knowledge was ignored, just like Filch's, just like Myrtle's. The adults trusted themselves too much, and the children not at all. What if a magical engineer had been called? Surely the Ministry of Magic could have dispatched a structural inspector or an unspeakable with expertise in hidden magical architecture, someone who could scan the ancient walls for hidden chambers or follow the plumbing to find where it ends. Instead, the school remained closed within itself, dealing with an ancient threat using the same old tools: suspicion, silence, and inaction. The idea of investigating the physical structure of Hogwarts never seemed to occur to anyone with authority. Even when the entrance to the chamber was discovered in a bathroom, there was no collective acknowledgement of the failure. No one said, "We should have checked the pipes sooner." No apology was issued to the students who were placed in harm's way. It was as if the discovery of the chamber and the slaying of the Basilisk conveniently erased the incompetence of the adults. Harry was praised, but no one examined why it took two 12-year-olds to solve a problem that a dozen trained wizards couldn't. In the end, the story of the Chamber of Secrets isn't just about bravery or the legacy of Slytherin or the danger of hidden prejudice. It's also about neglect, about how intelligence without action is useless. The school was filled with brilliant minds, but when it came time to apply reason and curiosity, they failed. The pipes were right there, running beneath their feet, humming with danger, echoing with hisses, but no one listened, no one looked, and so the truth stayed hidden until children, not wizards, finally dared to crawl through the darkness and find it. Number 26. Why build a monster lair inside a school? In the cold, damp shadows beneath Hogwarts, a beast slept for centuries. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets, long dismissed as a fairy tale by many, came crashing into reality during Harry Potter's second year. But beyond the thrills and dangers, beyond the petrified students and the hiss of Parseltongue, there lies a deeper question, one that few dare to ask. Why would Salazar Slytherin, cunning and calculated, choose to build his monster's lair inside a school he helped create? Why place the Basilisk, his deadly weapon, right under the feet of his enemies, hidden among the very children he sought to purge? Salazar Slytherin was no fool. He was one of the greatest wizards of his age, a master of dark arts, and a founder of the most prestigious magical institution in Britain. His hatred for Muggleborns ran deep. Unworthy to learn magic, he believed. According to Professor Binns, Slytherin wanted to be more selective about who could attend Hogwarts. When the others disagreed, tensions rose until Slytherin left the school, but not before he built a secret chamber accessible only to his heir. In that chamber he placed a monster capable of cleansing the school of those he deemed impure. But why would such a meticulous, ambitious man tie his genocidal hopes to a snake in a school basement? The very idea seems recklessly symbolic. Hogwarts is not some fortress of evil, it's a shared institution built alongside Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw. All four founders poured their magic, will, and identity into the castle. It is protected by ancient enchantments, and its rooms shift and change with intent. To hide a deadly secret there, under the watchful eyes of powerful witches and wizards, required not just audacity, but magic of the highest caliber. Wouldn't it have been easier to raise the Basilisk elsewhere, in a hidden fortress, a cave, a remote manor where only his followers might gather in secrecy? But Slytherin chose Hogwarts. That choice suggests a disturbing intimacy with the place, not just as a school, but as a battleground. For Slytherin, the castle was the ideological front line. By planting the chamber deep within it, he was planting a time-delayed curse, a political statement woven into stone. His war against Muggleborns wasn't meant to be fought from the outside, it was to erupt from within. The chamber was not just a vault, it was a ticking weapon of betrayal. Still, there's a glaring problem. This plan required too much trust in fate. Slytherin left behind a monster only one specific heir could control, and centuries would pass before that heir, Tom Riddle, appeared. There was no guarantee that such an heir would ever be born. No certainty they would find the entrance, speak Parseltongue, or even share his hatred. What kind of long-term strategy hinges on so many variables? Even Voldemort, who considered himself the true heir, failed to kill a single Muggle born during his first opening of the chamber. The Basilisk, bound to crawl through pipes and shadowy walls, was powerful, yes, but vulnerable to roosters, phoenixes, mirrors, and perhaps even suspicion. A deeper look suggests Slytherin's plan was not just flawed but paradoxical. He claimed to loathe Muggle-borns but built a plan dependent on Hogwarts' continued operation, a school where Muggle-borns would be present. If the Chamber's purpose was to purge, then the continued admission of unworthy students was essential. The castle had to keep functioning as a school, generation after generation, so that eventually the chamber could be opened. It's almost as if Slytherin didn't want to destroy Hogwarts. He wanted it to become his instrument. This obsession with legacy is perhaps the real clue. Salazar Slytherin didn't just want Muggle-borns gone, he wanted his name and his philosophy to dominate the future. The Basilisk was not a blunt instrument of violence. It was a ghostly messenger from the past, a relic meant to prove his vision was eternal. The chamber was a shrine, not just a weapon. Its design, ancient pipes, stone serpents, and a statue of Slytherin himself, screamed vanity. It was meant to be found. It was meant to awe. Tom Riddle understood this. When he discovered the chamber, he didn't simply unleash the monster to kill. He left messages on walls. He crafted a persona with the air of Slytherin and wove terror with precision. He even created a diary, a Horcrux, to ensure the chamber could be opened again. Riddle treated the chamber not just as a means of destruction, but as a legacy engine, a continuation of Slytherin's mission through theatre and fear. But unlike Slytherin, Riddle was not willing to wait. He took the idea and sharpened it into a personal tool of power, and even then it failed. Dumbledore, ever the strategist, recognized the chamber's flaw. "Voldemort was probably the most brilliant student Hogwarts has ever seen," he once said. Yet even with that brilliance, the plan nearly collapsed when Harry survived the attack in the girls' bathroom. The Basilisk, for all its terror, could not navigate Hogwarts with complete freedom. It relied on secrecy, stealth, and the hope that no one would trace the path of death. This was no grand assault. It was murder in whispers. Slytherin's entire logic collapses under scrutiny. If his true aim was the purging of Muggle-borns, a far more efficient method would have been political. He could have rallied pure-blood families, formed a secret order, or even cursed the school directly. Instead, he chose a cryptic chamber, a monster that could be controlled only by one person, and hid it beneath a building filled with skilled witches and wizards. It's hard not to see it as madness or arrogance. Perhaps he thought his bloodline was too noble to fail. Perhaps he believed his heir would always rise. The monster itself adds to the contradictions. A basilisk is not a subtle creature. It leaves corpses. It cannot be reasoned with. If Slytherin truly expected it to be used in his absence, then he must have known it would attract attention immediately. One death would be enough to prompt massive investigations, spell work, and alarm. That's exactly what happened in Harry's second year. Filch's cat was only petrified, and the school nearly closed. A true bloodbath would have brought the ministry in force. Did Slytherin not foresee that, or did he simply not care? The nature of the chamber's concealment also raises doubts. The entrance lies behind a sink in a girl's bathroom, a location that makes little sense in Slytherin's time, centuries before modern plumbing. Pipes are mentioned repeatedly. How would a 10th century wizard design a chamber compatible with 20th century infrastructure? The likely answer is that the basilisk travelled through magically expanded or enchanted spaces that evolved over time, a deeply unstable and unpredictable method of navigation. It means the plan, already full of holes, relied on Hogwarts, staying unchanged for 1,000 years. Slytherin's legacy, therefore, is not that of a brilliant conspirator, but of a bitter idealist whose rage outlived his logic. He didn't build the chamber to win a war. He built it to cling to a failed vision. The presence of the basilisk beneath the school was not an act of strategic brilliance, but an emotional outburst turned to stone. It was less a masterstroke and more a curse, born from spite, petrified in secrecy. And perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. The founder who championed cunning, calculation, and ambition chose a plan so riddled with flaws that it nearly exposed itself every time it moved. The Chamber of Secrets was not a weapon designed to win. It was a tomb of delusion. It whispered of a future that never came, of heirs who might never appear, and of purity that would never reign. In the end, it was undone by the very thing Slytherin hated. A Muggle-born girl, Hermione Granger, who pieced together the puzzle, not by force, by thought, by courage, by knowledge. Slytherin wanted power through secrecy, through bloodlines, through fear. But Hogwarts, in its living heart, rejected him. The chamber remained sealed for centuries, not because it was perfectly hidden, but because the school itself moved on. Students came and went, friendships formed, ideas grew, and when the chamber finally opened, it was a boy named Harry, half-blood, unwanted and brave, who defeated the monster, shattered the myth, and proved that Slytherin's dream had turned to dust. Number 27. Why wasn't Lucius Malfoy punished? In the aftermath of the chaos that consumed Hogwarts during Harry Potter's second year, a chilling sense of unresolved justice lingers. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened, students petrified, and a basilisk loosed upon the school. When the truth was finally unearthed, Tom Riddle's diary, the possessed Ginny Weasley, and the spectral shadow of Lord Voldemort, the most unsettling moment didn't involve the monster, but the man who made it all possible, Lucius Malfoy. In the quiet of the headmaster's office, Harry lays down an accusation. He connects the diary to Lucius. He names him. He exposes him. Dumbledore listens. Lucius doesn't deny it. And then, inexplicably, he walks away. This is not a minor oversight. This is a revelation that should have sparked headlines in the Daily Prophet and shaken the Ministry of Magic to its core. Lucius Malfoy, member of the Hogwarts Board of Governors and father of Draco Malfoy, knowingly placed a cursed, sentient object into the possession of an 11-year-old girl. That object was not merely dangerous, it was a fragment of Voldemort's soul, capable of manipulation, possession, and murder. Ginny Weasley nearly died, the school was nearly closed, and Lucius Malfoy, who so smugly threatened to pull his funding from Hogwarts earlier in the book, faced no consequences. This is not speculation. Harry's accusation is clear and public. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 18, Harry tells Lucius directly, "You gave it to her. In flourish and blots you slipped it into her cauldron." Dobby confirms this with his expression. Lucius, in response, does not defend himself, but coldly draws his wand and prepares to strike Harry with the Avada Kedavra curse, an act of attempted murder, in front of witnesses, within school grounds. Only Dobby's intervention saves the boy. And yet, despite this brazen act, and the damning accusation that preceded it, Lucius suffers nothing more than the loss of his house elf. No auras arrive, no formal charges are filed, no statement is released. The Ministry of Magic, already complicit in multiple failures of oversight, remains silent. The question echoes like footsteps in an empty corridor. Why was Lucius Malfoy not punished? One possible answer lies in the social structure of the wizarding world itself. Lucius Malfoy is not merely a wealthy man, he is an elite. His name carries weight. His donations, his connections, his pure-blood heritage, all are shields against justice. The Ministry of Magic, ever concerned with appearances and political alliances, turns a blind eye. Cornelius Fudge, the minister at the time, is notably intimidated by Lucius. He regularly defers to him, as seen when he allows Lucius to sway decisions regarding Dumbledore's suspension. In such a climate, is it any surprise that justice is negotiable? This raises a troubling notion. The laws of the wizarding world may not apply equally to all. If a lesser-known wizard had committed the same act, say Mundungus Fletcher, or even Arthur Weasley, there would have been immediate repercussions, but Lucius, cloaked in wealth and prestige, escapes unscathed. His role in endangering the entire student body is conveniently ignored. His threat against Harry Potter, the boy who lived, is dismissed. What does this say to young readers about power, responsibility, and the law? The implications for Hogwarts are equally disturbing. Dumbledore, despite being fully aware of Lucius's guilt, allows him to leave without a word. Some have argued that Dumbledore's decision stems from strategy, that he needs Lucius free, where he can be watched and manipulated. But this is a dangerous gamble. It places politics above justice and reputation above truth. Moreover, it undermines Dumbledore's moral authority. If he will not act when children are endangered, what does he truly stand for? Ginny Weasley, the primary victim of this ordeal, receives no apology, no reparation. She is left to cope with trauma and guilt, while the man who orchestrated her suffering continues to dine in wealth and influence. No adult, not even her parents, demand justice on her behalf. The silence is deafening. It is a reminder that in the wizarding world, some voices matter more than others. Lucius Malfoy's escape from justice also casts a long shadow over future events. His continued freedom allows him to play a central role in Voldemort's return. He funds the Dark Lord's activities. He participates in the Department of Mysteries' assault. He nearly kills Arthur Weasley. And all of this might have been prevented if action had been taken at the end of the Chamber of Secrets. The failure to punish him is not merely a moral oversight, it is a strategic blunder with far-reaching consequences. Even within the school itself, the message is corrosive. Draco Malfoy, witnessing his father's impunity, is emboldened. He learns that manipulation and cruelty bear no consequences. He learns that power protects. And so he mimics his father's arrogance, becoming more aggressive, more bigoted, and more dangerous. The cycle repeats. The disease spreads, all because no one dared to confront Lucius Malfoy. The silence from the broader magical community is equally baffling. Surely other parents, upon hearing that a dark object was introduced into the school by a fellow governor, would demand an inquiry. Surely the press, so quick to condemn Dumbledore and glorify Gilderoy Lockhart, would seize on the scandal. And yet, nothing. No headlines, no trials, no protests. The only reasonable conclusion is that fear of power, of revenge, of political reprisal keeps the truth buried. Lucius's own reaction reveals much. He doesn't protest innocence. He doesn't argue that Harry's mistaken. Instead, he lunges for his wand. This is not the behavior of a falsely accused man. It is the reaction of someone who has been caught and sees no path but violence. That he is willing to cast a killing curse in a school hallway speaks to his true nature. That he faces no consequence for it speaks to the rot within the ministry. Dobby's liberation becomes a symbolic moment of minor justice, but it is woefully insufficient. A house elf is freed, yes, but a criminal remains untouched. The narrative almost invites readers to cheer the victory, as if a sock can balance the scales of justice. But it cannot, not when children were nearly killed, not when an ancient monster roamed the halls, loosed by a man who saw students as pawns in a political game.